All right, let's jump straight into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are talking about something we have all felt at some point. That absolutely gut-wrenching anxiety of logging into your bank app and just bracing yourself for the worst. But more importantly, we are going to look at why, despite what literally every influencer on the internet seems to be screaming at you, you really don't need $1 million to finally feel wealthy. We're going to break down the actual mechanics of wealth building, pulling from some super fascinating insights into human psychology and the cold, hard math of saving.
So do you actually need $1 million to feel secure? If you spend even 5 minutes looking at personal finance content, you'll see gurus pushing these massive, honestly intimidating milestones. They act like hitting 6 figures or becoming a millionaire is the only way to win. But, well, they're missing the big picture. They are completely overlooking a much smaller, way more achievable threshold that literally changes the rules of the entire game. It's like an invisible barrier, and the moment you cross it, your whole reality shifts.
And that magic number? It's $20,000. That is the invisible barrier. It is the absolute dividing line between barely surviving paycheck to paycheck and actually putting your wealth building on autopilot. Think about saving money like trying to push a massive boulder up a really steep hill. At first, you are sweating, straining, and gravity is just fighting you every single step of the way. But $20,000? That's the exact moment your boulder crests the top of the hill. And from then on, gravity is finally working for you.
Okay, let's look at how this works in Section 1, Escaping Survival Mode, which is really the psychological engine of this whole concept. Look, before you hit that 20 grand mark, your brain is just wired completely differently. It makes building wealth practically impossible because you're stuck in what psychologists call survival mode. This is a mental state where literally every financial decision you make is filtered through fear and scarcity. You know the feeling, right? When a flat tire or a broken laptop feels like a complete disaster, you can't even think about planning for the future because your financial house is just constantly on fire. It eats up all your mental bandwidth. You might even stick it out in a toxic job just because you literally can't afford the risk of quitting.
To put this into perspective, just take a look at this data from Vanguard. It brilliantly shows the escape route. Check out that first jump. Having just $2,000 in emergency savings spikes your financial well-being by a massive 21%. That tiny little buffer is what pulls you out of pure panic mode. But then, when you push that emergency fund to cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which, is roughly $20,000 for most folks, you get another 13% boost. This right here is the exact moment you get the breathing room to shift your brain from just hoarding cash to proactively building real wealth.
Moving right along to Section 2, the math of momentum. Basically, what happens after you push that boulder to the top. Once you get over that hill, a mathematical engine just takes over. Let's say you've got the discipline to save $1,000 a month, and you're getting an average 8% return. Getting that very first $20,000 is a total grind. It takes about 19 months of really hard sacrifice. But watch what happens next. Your second $20,000 doesn't take another 19 months. It only takes 17. You're doing the exact same amount of work, but you just shaved 2 whole months off the clock because your first 20 grand is now making its own money. By the time your portfolio is sitting at $400,000, generating your next 20 grand takes just 5 months. 5 months! Compound interest is doing the heavy lifting for you.
And the beauty of this is that it isn't some secret hedge fund trick reserved for billionaires. It's just basic math. It's scale. Look, a 10% return on $2,000 makes you $200, which is, nice, but it's not changing your life. But that exact same 10% growth on $20,000 yields $2,000 in profit. You didn't hustle any harder, you didn't put in more hours, you just had more money working for you. That scale completely transforms tiny little percentage wins into massive automatic progress.
Which brings us to Section 3, the career superpower, better known as having walking away money. Saving up this kind of cash takes serious discipline, and that discipline actually rewires your brain, completely changing how you view work and money. Think about building that first 20 grand. You have to track your spending, say no to things, and delay gratification. And by doing that, you prove to yourself that you actually control your money, not the other way around. It's a huge shift. In the broke mindset, you're agonizing over a $3 coffee or standing in the grocery aisle debating generic cereal, but in the 20K mindset, you just stop sweating that small stuff because you know it doesn't really move the needle. Instead, you're using that mental energy for the huge choices that actually swing your net worth, like optimizing your rent, negotiating your salary, and managing investments.
And man, does this mindset spill over into your career. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're essentially trapped. You can't demand a raise or push back on a terrible boss because you desperately need that next deposit to clear. But 20 grand? That is walking away money.
It lets you negotiate from a position of absolute strength instead of panic. You can set boundaries, you can ask for what you're worth, and the ironic part, you usually don't even have to quit. Just knowing you have that safety net makes you project this extreme confidence at work. It creates a feedback loop. You get better projects, way more respect, and eventually a lot more income. It is quite literally a career superpower.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we need to talk about Section 4, the opportunity cost trap, or in simpler terms, how not to blow it.
Because here is the single biggest mistake people make right after they hit this milestone and get that rush of confidence. They immediately blow their foundation on some shiny new reward, and yeah, it usually has 4 wheels. Check out this number, $400,000. Between car payments, full coverage insurance, maintenance, and gas, your average person easily drops $600 to $800 a month just to get around. Over a 40-year period, that's over $400,000. People are actively destroying their wealth on things that rapidly lose value, all while throwing their hands up and complaining they can't afford to invest.
This comparison really nails how the $20,000 mindset changes the way you look at big price tags. The second you drive a brand new $30,000 car off the dealer lot, poof, it loses 20% of its value. Gone. When you have a solid financial foundation, you start filtering everything through opportunity cost. You suddenly realize a $30,000 car isn't actually 30 grand. If you had invested that money over 20 years instead, it's actually $200,000 stolen directly from your future financial independence. When you look at it like that, driving a reliable older Honda doesn't feel like a sacrifice at all. It feels like a brilliant, empowering strategy that lets you sleep like a baby at night.
All right, final piece of the puzzle, Section 5, designing your future and going from just surviving to actually thriving.
At the end of the day, having this cash isn't really about the digits on your phone screen. It's about having options, and options give you the freedom to actually step up and design the life you want. I absolutely love this quote from the source material. You proved you can control your money instead of letting it control you. Hitting this tipping point isn't about becoming a miserable penny pincher. It's a complete identity shift. Once you truly grasp compound interest and opportunity cost, you realize you don't even want half the junk you used to crave. You become incredibly intentional with your cash rather than watching it slip through your fingers on stuff that doesn't actually make you free.
So the biggest takeaway from all of this? Start building that $20,000 foundation today. Yeah, it'll take time, and for sure it's going to take discipline. But it is the exact turning point where the math and the psychology finally gang up in your favor. It's the moment you stop just surviving and start thriving. Which really leaves us with one massive question to ask ourselves as we look at our own bank accounts today. When it comes to your financial future, are you going to keep just reacting to whatever life throws at you, or are you going to take the wheel and design it?